Well, hello, everyone. This is not Dr. B. This is Maya Brewer, and it is Dr. B's 100th podcast episode for Living Beyond ADHD.
Welcome to the Living Beyond ADHD podcast. If you're looking for a fresh perspective and actionable steps on hot topics from focus to follow through to self-management and more, you are in the right place. Welcome your host, innovative educator, coach, and psychotherapist, Dr. B.
So I am here with Dr. B. I'm a student and a freelance writer. And when I say student, I mean student of Dr. B's Adventures in Achievement program. So welcome to your own show, Dr. B.
Well, thank you.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Awesome. So it is your 100th podcast episode. That's quite a milestone. So Dr. B, how do you feel about reaching this milestone?
Well, actually, it's perfect because for my listeners who have been with me maybe since the beginning, they know that the podcast was launched back in March or April of 2017. And here we are, 2022, March. So roughly 5 years. And what's really, really interesting is that I still have this thing about how long it will take to achieve something, as many of my listeners probably also do, because I thought it was going to take a year to be able to knock out the first 100 because I was doing 1 to 2 at a certain point, but there's been lapses. And I thought it would take a year to get my program material together and get the program launched. And that was 5 years. So maybe 5 years is what I need to think about for a lot of things in my trajectory.
Interesting. So it's kind of like you have a 5-year cycle.
Yeah.
Huh. I'm going to back up just a minute. You know, I've never asked you this question, and I just wanted to ask you, why do people call you Dr. B?
Referring to me as Dr. Cohen is way too formal, and I really don't respond to it because I don't think in those terms and that kind of formality. And one day, somewhere along the way, someone called me Dr. B, and it stuck because it's respectful, it's playful, I'm playful, and I don't want to be this Dr. Cohen heavy kind of feeling to me because I tend to be a lighter and more playful person. So Dr. B it is, and I've even considered legally changing my name, quite frankly, because I love it. It feels so good to me. It's just who I think of myself as. And when any other name people address me by, I just honestly don't respond the same way I do with Dr. B because I'm so used to that. And I feel that's me.
Wonderful. That's a great answer. That's a great answer. For our listeners, can you just kind of give us a little broad overview of who you are and how you got started in the online space?
It's interesting and a longer story that I'm going to share here. And maybe at some other point, we'll share the longer version if people would be interested. But the short version is I got training to be a hypnotherapist. I got training to be an NLP practitioner, took it to a master's level. And then I decided I needed something we'll call legitimate, even though those two professions are quite legitimate. So I pursued my licensure as a psychotherapist and also as an ADHD coach, and eventually as a researcher in 2 international studies. And the story goes on and on and on about all the other things that I've studied because I have a ravenous appetite for learning and integrating things that are useful and helpful to me and helpful to other people. So that's a little bit about me. As a psychotherapist, it's been over 30 years. And prior to that, with the NLP training and the hypnotherapy stuff, I think it goes back, I want to say, into the 70s.
Wow.
And so I was doing that as the work I did before I decided I needed to add that to a licensed profession. But that's what I used to do. It's kind of a back way of coming into it, but that's okay. And in terms of how I got started in the online space, I didn't decide to start in the online space. I got called to get on to the online space because I listen to my instincts and things that I sense. And maybe, I don't want to say 10, 20 years prior to getting on the online space, I wrote something on a flip chart that says, I want to make a significant positive difference in the lives of at least 1 million people in my lifetime. And I thought, how the heck are you going to do that seeing people one-on-one in a psychotherapy and coaching practice? You won't live long enough, even if you live to be 101 like your relatives, uncles. That's not possible. So how are you going to do that? And that's where the podcast got born in 2017, because that would have a positive impact. And that's when coming online December 2016, with the program, the very first version that got rolled out of Adventures in Achievement. But it was because I got called that I am uniquely qualified with everything that my life had been up to then and still is for 70 years now, uniquely qualified to be there, to do what I do, and to continue to do what I do for the rest of my life. So I answered the call, which is why I went online.
Wonderful. And how did you come up with the name Living Beyond ADHD?
Interesting. So the podcast was originally called Harness Your ADHD Power. And then a listener wrote to me and basically gave me the title because they said that everything I was talking about really wasn't about harnessing the power of your ADHD. It was about living beyond your ADHD. And I thought, I'll rebrand and change the name, which became Living Beyond ADHD, and it fits.
Really does.
That's how that happened. Wasn't my idea, was someone else's idea or suggestion of what they heard me talking about. And I listen to what people say. And if it resonates and I think it fits, then yes, of course.
All right. So Dr. B, you have ADHD. How did you discover that about yourself?
You would think I would have known years before, but I didn't. So when I first started as an intern in my private practice as an intern for my licensure, I had a client who was snorting cocaine every 4 hours, the same amount. And in my earlier years, I knew a lot of people who snorted cocaine, who were addicted. They did not snort cocaine that way. There's a huge difference between an addiction to cocaine and what this individual was doing. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know they were self-medicating as opposed to taking a stimulant medication that you would take every 4 hours. I didn't, because lo and behold, part of the education to be a psychotherapist or any kind of mental health professional does not include training on ADHD. It's not part of mainstream curriculum, except there's millions of us on the planet. And I fought that fight for years. But the boards across the US, I can't speak for outside the US, but They don't want to include it for whatever reason. I stop that fight and I just do what I do in my corner of the world. So I don't know what this is, but it's not an addiction. I went to my supervisor. She said, "So you're going to put him in rehab?" I said, "No, I'm not. They don't have a cocaine addiction." She said, "You're working under my license." I told you you're putting them in recovery. I said, "No disrespect, I'm not, because they don't have an addiction. And because you think they have an addiction, I'm not referring them to you either for an assessment. I'm sending them to someone else that I know who does workups and assessments to find out what this is," which I did, and came back with a diagnosis of ADHD.
Wow.
And that was my introduction. I consider that person my angel, so to speak, basically escorting me into the world of ADHD. I started devouring everything I could get my hands on, which at that time wasn't a lot because I had worked in medicine. I took things that doctors can study. I took things that coaches at that time, again, wasn't much, could study. Anything I could get my hands on is what I did. And I studied and studied and studied, and then finally found a few programs here and there that I could get into, one of them a coaching program and other things. But anything I could read, any course, any class, anything at all. And I continued to work with that client. I didn't refer them out because we had bonded. They wanted to work with me. And I gave them an answer as to why they were doing what they were doing. And they got referred to a psychiatrist. They stopped snorting coke. They got assessed. They got on a medication. The medication worked great. And we started working together about what needed to happen to address their ADHD. That was my intro into the world. And the more I studied, the more I saw me. And then I went to see if I could get a diagnosis. But being a bright, gifted, underachieving adult, they didn't want to assess me because they didn't believe this could be something that would be me. So one place wouldn't even assess me. One place threw me out when we started. And another, he took 10 hours of my money, assessed me, and told me, "You're only a little anxious, but you don't have ADHD, and there's nothing else I find." And that was his statement for me. And anyone who knows me, I'm pretty direct and to the point, and sometimes excessively so. I told the guy he needed to go back to school if he was representing himself as someone who properly assessed people, because I gave him everything he needed to assess me, because I could have assessed me and diagnosed me with my license at that time. I didn't want to. I wanted someone else to do it. And I gave them everything I knew about me that, of course, is true, but still, no, because I'm a bright, gifted underachiever, just like so many of my listeners. And people don't believe us. They see academic achievements, which wasn't really me. That's not where I was excelling, but I excelled in so many other things that I was doing. There's just no way. I'm running a business. I have a private practice. I'm doing all of this. It's full time. I built it myself. Everything I did in my life, they go, "No, this isn't you." Yeah, it is. And it was really disheartening. Yes. Because it's one thing if you don't know to go. It's another thing to know to go and end up with someone who doesn't know and can't diagnose and assess you and help you and work with you. Because again, it goes back to there's no requirement for any educational academia about us. So how would they know? We're stuck in this place.
Dr. B, it's like so many of us, give our symptoms and tell the doctors what's going on and what we're struggling with. and then it's like we get poo-pooed, or I hate to say that term, but it's just like
fine.
we're voiceless. We're voiceless and people don't hear us.
No,
And
they
don't
don't.
chat about us.
But they do hear us. But it's
Okay.
like if you'd never seen a dog, you wouldn't know what a dog is. You had no reference point for what a dog is. And some cute little dog like my dog Pink could be standing right in front of you. And you could describe that it's a four-legged, it's furry, et cetera, but you wouldn't have a name for it. You could describe the criteria about Pink. So we go and we give all this criteria and all this information, and they go, okay, so this person, this and this and this and this, but they can't add up the column and make it into ADHD or underdeveloped executive function because they don't have a name and a word because they didn't study it. They know depression, so they can give us depression diagnoses. They know anxiety, they can give us that diagnosis. Addictions, they can give us that diagnosis. Trauma, they can give us that diagnosis. But they can't give us a diagnosis of what it really is. So we get depression treatments, anxiety treatments, trauma treatments, and the real thing that needs to be addressed, which most likely is contributing to our depression, go figure, or our anxiety, go figure, will never get addressed if this doesn't get changed.
Yeah. I mean, it's like all these Band-Aids put on all these issues, but the root core issue is never addressed. People spend so much time looking and searching and trying to find answers.
And here's what's worse, if we want to go a little deeper into worse, is the only diagnosis that includes executive function skills is ADHD. Not depression, not anxiety, not trauma, not addictions, not chronic illnesses, not any of the conditions that I talk about in other episodes here on the podcast that can lead to underdeveloped executive function skills, because the energy that it takes to be present, to develop the skills, is being hijacked by other conditions, including ADHD. And because of that, the energy that needs to be going to the development of it, if people have dysfunctional home life, their family of origin, and there's fighting and all kinds of chaos or an addiction or whatever's going on, all that energy and focus is on surviving, living in that kind of an environment. Where's the energy supposed to come from to develop these skills and focus on the development of the skills? It can't. But see, if you don't qualify for an ADHD diagnosis, and you only would qualify for an underdeveloped executive function diagnosis, you can't get there except if you get an ADHD diagnosis, because 90% of the ADHD diagnosis is executive function skills.
Did you say 90%?
Yes, because the 10%, well, to me, those are my numbers. The 10% that I consider ADHD is being inattentive, hyperactive, impulsive, or a combination of three, of which medication is designed to address that. Medication is not designed to address the fact that we can't plan or organize our thoughts, our environment. We can't start, we can't keep going. We can't make decisions. We can't even decide what decision to make. We can't prioritize. We can't, all the list of executive function skills that get underdeveloped and don't get an opportunity because they get derailed and hijacked because of other life experiences when we're growing up, when they should be developing. And it isn't our fault. And it isn't the fault of the professionals, in the sense that they don't know that they're supposed to be getting this training, except I would hope they do at this point, but they don't. And if they don't take matters into their own hands, then millions of people are going to people with no training that are lucky if they get an ADHD diagnosis. And in a previous episode, because I'm a bit of a rebel, and you probably know this about me, and probably my listeners know as well, is that I gave my listeners the diagnostic code for impaired executive function. And they can look it up online. I don't remember it right now. I didn't write it down to bring it here, but they can look it up online and they can go to their professionals. I even gave them what it says, the description. The description is almost everything that you see in ADHD that isn't the three that I said. And it's like if we extracted that chunk and put it in depression, anxiety, addictions, chronic illnesses, trauma, if we took the chunk, that 90%, and put it on the others, then no matter what, hopefully practitioners would be assessing executive function skills for the millions and millions of people who don't have ADHD, but they do have underdeveloped executive function skills, which is why they're not functioning and why I wasn't the way I needed to. Because here's another thing about being a gifted underachiever. The gap for us is bigger because your potential is like way up here and your ability is way down here. And this gap between the two, and people say, Dr. B's not living up to her potential in kindergarten or first grade or high school or junior high, or says it to everybody who can relate to that we're not living up to our potential. Go figure. How are we supposed to live up to our potential if we don't have these skills?
It's so true, Dr. B. I mean, I got to write a blog post. Do you remember?
Yes.
About chaos and Mr. Order?
Yes.
My husband is like the executive function guru guy, and he has everything in order. And he always asks me what my agenda is each day. And I'm like, what? Why do I have to have an agenda? What is that? I'm not your business partner.
Right.
You know, it was funny, our marriage, but yeah, I'm one of those kids that lived through trauma and different things like that. And, when I first met you, I thought executive functions. I mean, I'm not a CEO. Right. I'm not in the professional, like where I need executive functions. I didn't realize they were everyday life core skill functions.
Sure.
Not just for work, but for everyday life. And that leads me to my next question I have for you is like, how did you decide to consciously focus on adults with the ADHD instead of broadly towards everybody?
Well, because it's what I know best. Because I spent so much, honestly, it's what I spent so much time researching and studying. First for me, and then for clients, and eventually for students. I could do what I do with my eyes closed because my students joke with me, but I also know they're serious when they tell me, Dr. B, there isn't anything we've ever asked you that you don't have an answer for. And honestly, not from an arrogant standpoint, because it's not that. It's just there was so much I needed to learn for me to be successful and be who I am today, that they're going to need that information. They're going to need the benefit of the information from all the different fields that I've worked in medicine and in law and in insurance. And in research and studying like reflexology and bodybuilding and physical fitness and health and nutrition and the list and medications and everything. It just goes on and on and on because I needed that information to be my best self. And so does everybody else. I'm not the exception. So I can answer.
It's like how old are you? 70 years old, right? 70?
Going on 71 in April.
Yes.
Yes.
So you have all this breadth and depth of experience and knowledge that you bring to your students.
Yes.
That's
And
phenomenal.
thank you.
Yeah.
It's what one of my mentors says, is that you have a knowing, not knowledge, not information. You have a knowing, and a knowing comes from experience. A knowing comes from been there, done it, got through it, worked it out, resolved it, and moved beyond. Without a knowing, which is also something that I do in my program, I'm not interested in imparting information. People can get information from a book. They can get information from a video or a course or whatever. I want them to have a knowing. I want them to learn that transformation and change from the inside out is real, but it comes from knowing. It does not come from knowledge, because knowledge is pure potential, not applied, a big zero. It's like you don't have it if you can't use it, if it doesn't have any meaning or value. It's just more stuff stuck in your head. And I used to be the big consumer of knowledge, and more and more and more knowledge. Like, if I have more knowledge, certainly I'll be able to live better and solve things, instead of the knowledge never did anything. It's the knowing.
This podcast is sponsored by Pure Potential with Dr. B. You can head over to drbarbaracohen.com and find the podcast episodes and transcripts. Great free content, plus information on programs and products, including the groundbreaking online Adventures in Achievement Foundational Skills Training and Coaching Program. You can also learn about Dr. B's masterclasses on decision-making, time management, and banishing procrastination. That's drbarbaracohen.com.
Your experience, you've had to walk through trial and error and, keep trying, and it becomes who you are as you learn and experience it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I think sometimes we get in this spiral of thinking, okay, we know that information now. Now it's going to be integrated into our life simply because we know, or we heard it on a podcast, or we read the right book, or it
right.
doesn't work.
But it doesn't. It's like, again, a story from another person, but it illustrates the point. Is they asked the question, if I gave you a book on swimming and you read the whole thing cover to cover, and I asked you, now, do you know how to swim? If you say yes, you're wrong. You don't know how to swim until you get in the water and start applying what's in the book and get a knowing of swimming in your body. Because without that knowing, all you have is a bunch of information about what swimming is, like sitting out there, that means nothing until you get in the water and swim.
It's just like being a little kid and learning how to swim, right?
Yeah.
We're afraid at first, and then hopefully our good parents will encourage us to get in the water and help us kick our feet around. And then until we gain more and more experience, it's like we have to take these baby steps, even with growing our executive function skills, even
Absolutely.
with growing things that we've supposed to have known when we were younger. It just requires so much patience of ourselves and having a great place to learn that. So I want to ask you this question. Believe is the best way for adults with ADHD to achieve the things they want in life, especially when we can feel like it's an uphill battle all the time?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that I know is really, really important is a safe space, and a safe space with community of like-minded individuals, because there's still so much stigma and so much separation and so much silence and hiding and everything that people do, where we're just not being transparent and open and honest that this is me. I don't know how to cook, or I don't know how to organize, or look at this mess in the corner that's been there for 12 years and I don't even know where to start. It's like, if you can't feel safe amongst a community of like-minded individuals on a journey going the same place you want to go, only maybe differently because they have different needs, but it's the same journey in a sense. If you can't have that first, it doesn't work. And one of the things I know I've been gifted with my whole life is to create safe spaces for people, whether I did it in person, whether I do it online. There is a level of safety. And what I was told years ago is, even in recovery, they have this. I learned it there some 30 some odd years ago. If you want people to be emotionally, we'll say, naked, transparent, honest, you have to step up and go first. And I'm always willing to do that, because there isn't anything that's relevant that I won't talk about if it'll benefit someone that I'm working with. So I have to go first. So in that context and space of a safe space and a safe environment with group learning and not feeling alone, not feeling like you're the outsider and you're the only one, once that's created, which is what I've been creating for years and years and years, then it comes down to what I've called the empowered achiever effect, because there's 5 elements to that I see. One is, I don't know anyone else, not in private practice for sure, or even online, that first wants to know where people are starting for real. Because people want to know, because they don't understand how come all this is happening. And so giving people,
how bad is it really?
Yes, or how good is it really?
Exactly. Yes.
A starting point. It's like, okay, so I'm strong here, weak here, strong here, weak here, strong, strong, strong. We can leverage strength for weakness and all these different things that I teach people to do. So the first element in those 5 elements is everybody who comes in to work with me in the Adventures in Achievement program gets an online executive function assessment. And they also get the opportunity to type up 2 pages, not more, because I want to be able to read it. So they have to consolidate it into 2 pages and they send it to me. I get their executive function results. I get their 2 pages. I read it. I make notes, and I record a personal video for every student, basically telling them what the findings of their assessment are in light of what they wrote, and explaining how it could have happened, etc. And everyone who's ever gotten that is just like, wow, mind blown, because it explains so much. And then when we start with our kickoff session in the program, we start with this training. I call it a mini training. It's not so mini, about limiting beliefs and outdated identities. I don't know anybody else who does that kind of work either, because imagine, I know for me, and imagine for you and people that are listening, how many limiting beliefs we're carrying around inside that you get an opportunity to externalize in a forum that I created. It's a private forum for students, in addition to your limiting identities that are outdated, that are holding you back. And that's the second element. That's the mind-blowing thing of they get to look at this externalized list of limiting beliefs and outdated identities, and how could I possibly be successful believing all these things? No wonder. Between the assessment and that, no wonder. Mm-hmm. Now I get it. And then, not to leave people hanging, we go to the third element, which is what I call pre-skills for executive function, because this is setting people up for success, not to fail. And it's like, if I were just to launch into the meat of the executive function skill development, and people don't know how to manage themselves or manage their time or deal with procrastination, which is a symptom, not an issue, or know how to make decisions that are easy to make with a methodology based on criteria, values, and a whole bunch of other things. Imagine if you can't do those three things, and I throw you into the executive function skill training.
Or even the swimming pool.
Yes. How successful are you going to be? Because in those first weeks, which is actually like a month of doing pre-skill training, I get to learn where you have strengths, where you have weaknesses, how you solve these things. I get to see so much about my students in that first phase of what we're doing in the pre-skill training, so that I know a lot about their struggles, just watching how they navigate those three things that we're doing. And then, because we've had coaching calls where I'm coaching them on those trainings so they can start working with it differently, then they're ready to start the executive function skill training, to start doing things like increasing their ability to see clearly and the right information and all the information with metacognition, not limiting what they see, and to be, if they're overly inhibited or under inhibited, to correct that, and their working memory and all the things that we cover in that phase of the program. And then I'm weaving maintenance the entire time of the program, because how many things have you done that you finish and you go, yay, and you celebrate, and then you don't know that you're supposed to maintain it and no one taught you how to maintain it, and it goes away over time. And then you start, and it's like Groundhog Day over and over again, like you have to keep doing it from the beginning. It's awful. And so they get training on maintenance formally as a skill.
Yes.
They also get taught maintenance through the entire time that we're together, because I don't want to just spring it on them at the end. It's like, because it's a skill that develops over time. I want them to maintain everything they're doing.
Oh, Dr. B, this sounds like such a unique program. I mean, I haven't heard anything out there about any of these elements being all brought together in one place.
I don't see any other way to make the changes, because this is the work I did over the years and years and years of my life, that I'm offering people the opportunity to experience and benefit from in a 7-month journey, not years, 7 months. It's like, this is years of my life learning, developing, for me first, to see that it even works, and then bringing it together in a way that isn't going to be years and years for other people to do it the way that I did it, because there was no one for me to go to. That's the whole point. I looked. It's like, I need help with this. I need help with this. I need help with this. And there wasn't. And when I started finding it, I could piece it together. I can get this here, and I can get this here, and I can get this here, but you're having to have a relationship with all these people independent of each other, because it's not collectively in one place with one person who knows your whole journey for 7 months and can refer back to what you were doing or struggling with in the first or second month.
It also takes out all the confusion. Because when you are getting it from so many, these different pieces here and there, some of the material that you're getting or the information can kind of conflict with one another.
Of course.
And then you're trying to wrestle through those pieces that are conflicting, and what piece works for me and what piece doesn't. And then you just want to throw in the towel because it's too hard to fit it all together.
Right. So and then imagine being filled with self-doubt anyway.
Yes.
Then who do you believe? Not just even how do you fit it together?
Exactly. Oh my. So Dr. B, you are so passionate. Why do you do what you do?
Why do I do what I do? Because I got called. And maybe some of my listeners will relate to that. Maybe some won't. That's okay. This was a calling. Doggone it. And it's an emotional calling. And this is just what happens when I tap into why. Because this was a calling. This was, I am uniquely qualified to do this. And I need to do this because I know how many years I suffered. I know there's millions of people on the planet suffering today. And I made it my mission to put an end to the needless suffering, because if people could get the help and not suffer, they're entitled to get the help and not suffer. And because the governing bodies don't want to help, I help. And it's like, it pains me. And every single day to stay out of this pain, every day I wake up and I envision a world where every single adult, because adults who have kids that I work with are teaching their children. And it's going to stop with this generation, with the adults that I'm working with who either work with kids or have kids or in touch with kids, because they're teaching them, which means I look 7 generations out, which is what I do. And I see this is over. I see that everybody walking around on the planet has well-developed executive function skills. And I envision a world where that's true. And boy, let me tell you, that world is so different than the world we live in today, because people can rise up and people can express their gifts, their God-given talents and gifts and abilities, because they have the skills to channel it through and be able to do that. There's so much that's holding people back. And what's holding them back is limiting beliefs, outdated identities, things we're indoctrinated with at home or in society, in addition to an absence of well-developed skills. So how are we supposed to make manifest that which is God-given inside of each and every one of us if we don't have the tools to do it with? It's awful. And I can't sit with that. So basically, this is making a journey in the 7 months that I was talking about in the program. What I did and the journey I take people on is going from that place of being the gifted underachiever, which I was, and they are, I'm sure, in some degree or another, no matter their situation, and moving along a 7-month journey to becoming that empowered achiever, which I know doggone it, I know I am today.
Yes.
In ways that I never knew I would have the strength or ability to do what I have tackled to do in my life. Because one of the things that I know about me that distinguishes me, but it doesn't have to be the thing that distinguishes me from my listeners or students or anyone, is I don't stop, I don't quit, I don't throw in the towel. And all it is a belief that's sacred to me, and a way of being, an identity, a way of living my life, that I don't quit, I don't stop, I go the distance. I will go the distance for what it is that's important to me. And it's exactly what I help my students do, because sometimes they want to quit and they want to give up because they're discouraged, and I help them to not quit and not give up. It's a bump in the road. They get back up, they keep going, they make it to become that empowered achiever. And they are blown away to look back 7 months earlier and watch a replay of a coaching call they were on at the beginning of their program journey and listen to themselves there and look at themselves there and then look at themselves where they are now 7 months later. It's night and day difference.
That's amazing, Dr. B. I mean, I just love that whole concept of going from a gifted underachiever to the empowered achiever.
I do too. I do too.
It's so life-giving, so inspirational, but it's just not inspiration. I mean, there's actually proven steps. People have walked through this. I've walked through this, and we've seen it in our lives. We've seen that change. So what would you say is your greatest accomplishment in your program so far?
The greatest accomplishment, like I said, I don't quit. I don't stop. I go the distance, and I make sure my students learn to do that as well. Because if we're going to quit and stop at the first bump in the road, we're never going to become that empowered achiever. And if you hit the bump, it's a speed bump, big deal. It's not the end of the world. Even if you fall down, you have help to get up, because not only will the community help you to get back up emotionally, because they're that kind of supportive communities I create, but so will I. And if you don't know how to get back up, if you lose hope, I've been loaning hope to people, real hope, not cheerleader hope. I have been loaning hope to people for over 30 years because I have an abundance of hope. It isn't false hope, it's real hope, because I know what can happen if someone wants that result.
Excellent. Dr. B, thanks for your time today. This is your 100th podcast. How amazing. And I appreciate you telling us so much about yourself and your heart to help others. It's incredible. I loved hearing that we all have the potential to become that empowered achiever. There's tremendous hope. There's just so much hope when we invest our time and our effort and energy into our personal growth. Congratulations for all your hard work, for you as a person, and all that you've become, and how you are an example to us all of growth and continued empowerment. So if people want to connect with you, is the best place for connecting at drbarbaracohen.com/AIA? Is that how they can find out more information?
It would be, because that is an information opt-in list.
Okay.
Not anything that obligates them to anything. It's simply going to drbarbaracohen.com/AIA. Allows them to get on an information list, to get more information about executive function skills, about the program, the journey, very much what I talked about here today. If this is the journey they want, they will be the first ones notified when enrollment opens again. Enrollment's going to open up again for June for this year, 2022. We're going to have an early open enrollment before that. So being on that information list is a really good thing, because the moment, if this is what my listeners want, then the moment that it's open, they're first. And they're first to find out about the answers of, oh, how come? Yes, executive function, go figure.
Yes. And they can also look in the show notes for the link as well.
Absolutely.
Now, as we close out today, is there any last thing that you'd like to share with us, Dr. B, about anything?
I think it would be, I love my life. My life continues to get better every year of my life now. And I would love that for everyone who's listening, because the stories we hear about, it's a downward spin when you get older. I came to the development of my own executive function skills later in life. The way they are now, they continue to get stronger. exponentially continue to grow, even developing and sprouting new skills that I didn't even know about. I don't see this slowing down. I feel like I'm entering the best years of my life. And I entered those in my late 50s, early 60s, whenever that was, that they really solidified everything. So even for my listeners who are older, it ain't too late. Don't tell yourself that. If you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, I've worked with all age ranges of people. It isn't too late. If you are breathing still and on the planet and walking around in a body or sitting in a body, it is not too late to make a significant positive difference in your life moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. B. Thank you, everybody, for listening today.
Thank you, Maya, for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening today. If you're eager to make positive changes in your life and stop overwhelm and confusion from derailing you, head over to drbarbaracohen.com and see how Dr. B can help you today. Whether you love learning in an online group environment with personalized coaching or prefer the pace of guided self-study, Dr. B offers the skills, strategies, and individual support you need. Get started on your journey today by visiting the website at drbarbaracohen.com.